So yeah, follow these 11 steps and you will be ready for your bodybuilding competition, holiday or photo shoot. You will be truly shredded. What's going on YouTube, it's Jason, and in this video I am going to be discussing how to get shredded. I've already done a video on how to get lean, but this is one step further. This is mind-blowingly lean, like striations in the bottom of your abs, like super lean. I'm doing this video in response to a comment I got on one of my previous videos where someone requested a detailed video of how to get shredded. I really appreciate that. If you do want to see me do any specific videos, please let me know in the comments. Cool, so how do we get shredded? There are 11 steps that I'm going to go through that cover training, nutrition, rest, mindset, and the approach. But before I do that, I just wanted to get some caveats and warnings out of the way. Number one, the body fat percentages that I discuss in this video are in relation to skin fold caliper testing. Yes, DEXA is the gold standard of body fat testing, but it's not accessible for most people because of price and availability. Most of the guys that we see in films, magazines, and on social media relates to skin fold calipers. For example, when they say a man is 10% body fat, a lot of those guys are 10% body fat on calipers. Point number two, the body fat percentages that I'm going to be referring to are the body fat percentages of men. If you're a woman, add 8 to 10% to these numbers, which brings me on to point number three, a bit more controversial, but I do not recommend that women get shredded. Yes, there are women that need to get shredded for bodybuilding competition, but outside that, when you look into the science, the risks far outweigh the benefits. Women suffer a lot more hormonally when it comes to lower levels of body fat, to the extent that some of them lose their periods, and it takes months or sometimes even years to get it back. Men do suffer as well, but not to the same extent. Right, so now that's out of the way, how do we get shredded? By shredded, I mean 10% body fat or less. Lean is like 11 to 15, maybe 10 to 15, but definitely once you reach 10% body fat, and certainly less, you are like movie star lean, like elite level cover model shredded. Point number one is to take things slowly. Getting shredded is very different to getting lean. When you want to get lean, you can take a bit more of an aggressive approach and you can probably lose maybe 1 to 1.5% of your body fat per week. If you are trying to get down to lower levels of body fat, this strategy is likely to end in tears. For two reasons. The first is that when you are getting truly shredded, you are much more prone to muscle loss. Your body thinks that you are struggling to survive. Muscle becomes, in that case, a massive luxury that your body can't afford. And to that point, point number two, our bodies are built to survive. The leaner you get, the more that you encounter the body's defenses. Your body at a certain point, for most men, I would say like 11% body fat or less, some people maybe a little bit higher, will start to encounter resistance. Your body will be like, what on earth are you doing? You need to stop. The more aggressive you are with your fat loss strategy, the more aggressive these defenses will be. And so for these reasons, I would recommend at least 16 weeks if you want to get shredded. Obviously, this will depend on your starting body fat, but certainly no less than 12 weeks. You want to be losing body fat at a rate of around 0.5 kilos to about 0.7 kilos per week, or around 0.5% of your body weight. Now that might be slower than what you're used to, but this is the very reason why most people don't get shredded. Slow and steady wins the race. So most fat loss advice will tell you to drop your calories 500 below maintenance. I would say take this a little bit slower. From the off, drop your calories 300 below maintenance and bump up your steps about 2 or 3,000. Keep doing that until fat loss slows down, then increase your steps by 2 or 3,000 again. Keep doing that until fat loss slows down, and then drop your calories. You really want to try and resist the urge to drop calories until you absolutely need to. Cool, now moving on to nutrition, the most important part of the equation. Point number two is to get 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Now I know I said in previous videos that 1 gram of protein per pound is too high. It is. Most scientific studies don't show much benefit above getting 0.8 grams of protein per pound, but getting shredded is not a normal goal. Let's be honest, you are getting down to levels of body fat that are arguably unhealthy for your body. So you do need to take a different approach. More protein is going to ensure that you preserve as much muscle as possible, stay fuller for longer because protein does help with satiety, and you will increase what they call the thermic effect of food, which essentially is the calories that your body burns actually breaking down the protein. Trust me, you're going to need that extra protein when you get down to lower levels of body fat. Also, 0.8 grams of protein per pound is the upper limit, but there's no harm to getting more. There's just no additional benefit when it comes to things like muscle building. Point number 3 is to minimize your intake of processed foods. I would recommend keeping your processed food intake to no more than 15% of your total calorie intake. I recommend this for a few reasons. The first is that when you are in a calorie deficit, you have less calories to play with. If you're using up your calories on processed foods, you end up blowing your budget and you're more likely to go over. Reason number 2 is what I describe as awakening the beast. When you are getting leaner, you are going to be dealing with such strong hunger signals. If you're mucking around with highly palatable food, you are more likely to awaken the beast, crave, binge, and go off your diet. And reason number 3 is that processed food has very little nutritional value, and so you're much more likely to overeat. Focus instead on low calorie dense foods that are whole, high in protein and high in fiber. Point number 4 is to minimize your intake of supplements, or more specifically, protein snacks. I found when I was getting shredded and getting clients shredded that when you're trying to get your protein through things like protein shakes or protein bars, it doesn't fill you up as much as actual food. Like having 100 grams of chicken breast fills you up a lot more than having a grenade protein bar. And so if you're having all these protein snacks and supplements, you are more likely, in my experience, to overeat. So when trying to get shredded, personally, I stick to multivitamins, creatine, and ashwagandha. Maybe at a push fish oils if you want. I prefer to get my fish oils from actual fish, but if you want to throw it in there, that's fine. And then I reserve my protein supplements like shakes and bars as and when I need it. Point number 5 is to plan refeeds. A refeed is where you increase your calories and your carb intake so that you're eating around your maintenance calories or just under, and your carbohydrate intake is around 50% of your total calories. The reason we do this is to boost leptin. Leptin is a hormone that makes you feel full and sends a signal to the brain that you've had enough food. When you're getting shredded, the feeling of fullness is so hard to come by, like you are hungry all the time, and that's because your leptin hormone drops. By increasing your carbohydrate intake, you boost leptin and you start to feel full again. In terms of this strategy, you don't really need to employ it until you're like 11% body fat or less. When you're 12% body fat or above, for the vast majority of people, your body isn't under any intense threat of survival, and so you should be fine just eating normally until you get lean. When you do eventually get to 11% body fat, I would do a refeed once a week, and so I would increase your calories to your maintenance calories or just under, and I would make sure that in terms of macros, your carbohydrates make up at least 50% of your calories. To accommodate this, I would drop your protein intake to around 0.7 grams of protein per pound of body weight. When you increase your calories and your carbs, they actually have a muscle sparring or muscle protecting effect, and therefore you don't need as much protein. And then in terms of fats, these should make up the rest of your calories, so somewhere around 15% of your calorie intake. Depending on how lean you're looking to go, when you get down to 9% body fat or less, I would increase the refeed days to 2 a week. Like every 3 days you want to be getting a refeed. Cool, so nutrition fundamentals done, let's move on to training. Point number 6 is to reduce your training volume. When you are bulking, you have more calories to play with, you can push the needle, train till failure, and increase your total number of sets. When you are getting leaner, your risk of muscle loss, injury, and overall systemic fatigue is a lot higher. I hear loads of bodybuilders say that when they're cutting, they don't change anything about their training program. Now that's all well and good if you're on steroids, but if you're natural, it's just not gonna work. As I said, when you have less calories to play with, your risk of systemic fatigue goes up significantly. And the second thing is that for the vast majority of people that aren't brand new to training or on steroids, you are not going to build muscle in a caloric deficit. And so there's no real point pushing your body to the absolute max. The real risk that you are trying to minimize is muscle loss. Muscle gain is pretty much out of the question for like 99% of people. And so the best we could hope for is muscle preservation. And so to do this, you want to do what's described in science as the minimum effective volume to maintain your muscle mass. And so I recommend people dropping their training volume around 20 to 25% of what they normally do. And so let's say you normally do 12 sets on your chest per week. You want to drop that to somewhere between 9 and 10 sets. Keep your reps and weight lifted exactly the same. You didn't build your muscles lifting light weights, and so you're not going to keep your muscles that way either. Point number 7 is to train to build muscle. Now I know I mentioned that you're not going to build muscle while in a calorie deficit. I mentioned a few examples that you can do both at the same time in another video, but the vast majority of us just won't. You still need to train as though you could build muscle, i.e. you still need to push yourself. If you start backing off completely in terms of your effort and intensity, you're not going to maintain muscle mass because you didn't build muscle mass that way. And so for this reason, I would recommend training to within 2 to 3 reps short of failure. Point number 8 is about your step count. If you are looking to get truly shredded, you need to keep your step count high. I'm talking like 15,000 steps per day or more, but certainly no less than 12,000 steps. If you're someone that hovers around like 5,000–6,000 steps per day, you are going to have to bring your calories down so low that you're probably not going to make it. When I stepped on stage back in September, you speak to most of the competitors and their step counts were like 18,000, 20,000 and up to even 25,000 per day. No joke, these guys were literally moving every second of the day. And that's for 2 reasons. The first is that activity is one of the things that raises your metabolism. The more steps you are doing, the more calories you're burning at rest. And number 2, I mentioned this before, you can only push your calories so low. We know that you need to be in a calorie deficit. If you're not moving enough, your calories are going to be so painfully low, you're not going to stick to it and you're not going to finish the race. Point number 9 seems pretty obvious, but if you're trying to get truly shredded, rest has to be at the top of your priority list. If you're someone that doesn't get much sleep or you're struggling to get sleep in a specific season, forget getting shredded. Now that might sound extreme, but everyday Joe Blogs who's not even trying to get shredded would be negatively affected by not sleeping enough. When you're trying to get shredded, you are relying on sleep for a few things. The first is minimizing your levels of stress. You're already in a stress state because you are underfeeding. When you are not sleeping enough, your cortisol levels go up and you are more likely to lose muscle. The second thing is that when cortisol gets increased, there are 2 negative side effects. The first is that there is an increased risk of water retention. If you are bloated and carrying water under the skin, you are just not going to look as shredded. And point number 2, when cortisol increases, you also are more likely to crave things. You are stressed, your body is looking for a quick relief from that stress state. And so to minimize cravings, you need to manage cortisol. And point number 3 as to why sleep is important when getting shredded is that sleep manages your hunger hormone. You have a hunger hormone called ghrelin, which is regulated by sleep. If someone is undersleeping, that hormone gets thrown out of whack and you are far more likely to feel hungry multiple times per day. You can imagine, with more cravings and more hunger, you're only going to last so long. And so for this reason, I would say when trying to get shredded, Yes, 7 hours will be just about enough, but I recommend getting as much as possible, so like 8 or 9 hours. It might sound like a lot compared to your day to day, but getting shredded is no small feat. You need to make sacrifices. Point number 10 is about how you measure progress. When you are getting shredded, it is all about the visuals. When you are trying to lose weight, most people will obsess about the weighing scales, and each to their own. When you're dropping from like 30% body fat to 20, fill your boots. But as your body fat gets lower, like under 13% body fat, most of the changes that you see will be in the mirror. And so for this reason, I recommend doing 3 things in this order. Number 1, measure your waist around your belly button. When you are losing inches on your waist, it is only ever body fat, and so that's the most reliable indicator of body fat change, especially if you don't have access to skin fold calipers. Point number 2 is to look in the mirror and take regular photos. You're not going to see changes week to week when you're getting shredded, and so it's important to compare photos to track more accurately. And then only after you've done the first 2 points should you weigh yourself. Ideally, you want to do these 3 things about once a week, but certainly no more than twice. Your weight's going to fluctuate like 4 times a week. When we're getting shredded, we don't care about daily fluctuations, we want to see trends. And point number 11, and this is more of a mental one, but you need to prepare for intense hunger. Most people underestimate what real hunger looks like. When you get down towards 10% body fat, you'll know. There is a reason why being so lean commands so much respect from most people, because very few people can actually stick it out and get there. Even if you do everything right, even if you eat your fiber, low calorie dense foods and protein, you will feel hungry like 3 to 4 times a day. There is no getting around it. You need to prepare for 2 things. The first is intense hunger, and the second is reduced energy levels. When you drop your calories, you do get a slight dip in energy, but this is like 10x. I don't want to make any bones about this. It is hard, and that is why so few people get there. So yeah, that's it. How to get mind-blowingly shredded. Now, I don't recommend many people live there. To be honest, unless you have a body weight settling point that puts you in the genetic elite, 99.9% recurring of us will not be able to maintain body fat levels this low, unless of course you are on steroids, so don't try. But I do recommend everybody gets shredded at least once. It is an insane feeling. You look like a cover model, like insert any movie star in your favorite film. You look incredible. So yeah, follow these 11 steps and you will be ready for your bodybuilding competition, holiday or photo shoot. You will be truly shredded. Hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Don't forget to like it, comment below for the algorithm, it massively helps. Please subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.